Hello, David Politis here. Silk and Slopes Conversations, welcome. Today we have a very interesting pair of gentlemen to visit with us. Today we have the co-founders, CEO and COO of a company called Strider. This is Greg and Eric Levesque. Gentlemen, hello.
Hi, it's great to be with you, David. Thanks for inviting us in today.
You're welcome. Thank you. And yourself, thank you very much for coming in today.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, so Utah's not your home. I learned that you're from Maine. Talk to us about how you got from Maine to Utah and the creation of Strider, which I see as a very interesting company.
Yeah, well, Utah is home now, but you're right, originally from Maine, where we both grew up, and ended up going to school out here in Utah, Utah State University, where we did our undergrad, and then both left. So I went to D.C. for 10 years. Eric went to Wall Street and hopped around to a bunch of other places after that. And then a couple years ago, we had the opportunity to move back to Utah, where we've opened up our office in South Jordan and are building out a presence here in the Utah area.
Okay. And what was it about Utah that attracted you here, Eric?
So actually, when we started the company, one of the areas that we had always looked at was Utah, because the linguistic capability of the people here, the growth of the tech scene, and also the fact that it's just a great place to live and build a business with the support of the state and the local communities. It made it a top spot for us. And so we didn't wait very long. We started the company in May of 2019, and we were here, January 2020, looking at different sites, and then expanded with a formal office in 2021.
Okay. So all hell broke loose, of course, in early 2020.
That's right.
So what took you to D.C.?
Well, so first, it was a career opportunity in grad school. So I went to graduate school at Georgetown, and like a lot of folks who go to D.C., started working with government. So I was not a government employee, but worked on a lot of different government contracts with the Department of Defense, National Security Council, U.S. Trade Rep's office, all working around China-related national security issues.
And you speak, is it Mandarin, Cantonese, or both?
Mandarin.
Mandarin,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And you ended up on Wall Street, though.
Yeah.
And what took you to Wall Street besides money? Was it just the money?
Yeah. So that was an area that I was really interested in, just trying to understand like economics, the markets, how finance worked. And so, I landed there on the credit side doing research, and then I moved into thematic investment research, predominantly private markets. And then before Strider, I was at the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Oman. So we were building out a team there focused on global tech investments with a bit of a national objective angle to it. Many countries in the Gulf are trying to reorient their economies away from fossil fuels, and tech is a area that they're trying to invest heavily in. So I was part of an effort to do that, and that's actually where the, intersection between Greg's career and interests lined up with my own. And we went on very different career paths, but this is where that intersection hit, where a lot of the deals that I was working on actually were interesting in that there was a nexus between the commercial elements of doing an investment, but also government, where we were dealing with a lot of, I would say, like information asymmetry, because the counterparties that we were dealing with had more strategic government angles to them.
Information asymmetry.
Yeah.
I've heard the term asymmetry brought up a fair amount recently, especially when it has to do with conflict. But we may move that direction or not later. But
yeah, super.
But you don't speak Mandarin. You speak Russian.
Correct.
Do you also speak Arabic?
I don't. No.
Okay. All right. I was curious.
He knows a little bit.
Okay. Enough to get in trouble?
Enough to get in trouble and maybe order a few dishes.
There you go. Okay. So we have a Russian speaker. We have a Mandarin speaker working in areas of national security / information asymmetry. You're seeing how things are playing out. You both have an interest in technology.
Right.
There had to have been a trigger. Something happened, something you saw that occurred on a global basis, on a local basis. What was the nexus for the, maybe there's a need here, an opportunity?
So look, there's a number of them, but let me hit on one that really stands out, and that was back in 2016. So the U.S. Trade Rep's office conducted what was called a 301 investigation into Chinese trade practices. So basically, the agency was looking at how are they complying or not complying with World Trade Organization standards and things like that. A core part of that study looked at China's systematic efforts to steal IP globally. And as part of that initiative, there were a couple of economists that were brought in. Their job was to assess what is the total economic cost to the U.S. economy on an annualized basis from China's IP theft. And the number they came up with in terms of scope and scale is daunting. It was 400 to 600 billion per year.
Billion per year
in economic loss to the U.S. from IP theft. Now, that for us was a really big inflection point because who is addressing that problem? And the answer really right now is no one. Yeah. So that was where we saw this as not only something that was important as an American to address and to think through, like, what are ways we could tackle this, even if it's just a part of the problem, right? Like, Strider is not the total solution for that at scale. But what we realized was in this new geopolitical wave, companies are on the front lines. Governments are literally targeting Fortune 500 companies, their talent, their IP, and their supplier networks. And we have this disconnect between government agencies and their abilities to engage with industry to really tackle these problems, which is why you get $400 to $600 billion a year in loss.
And what you quickly realize, too, with that is that you don't get to a number that big if it's not systematic.
Right.
It's not just one-off incidences. This is a global system. And actually, the PRC is one actor. It's global. As Greg mentioned, we have a fundamental thesis that this next wave of strategic competition, industry is on the front lines, and the competition is for emerging technology leadership. And every country in the world, whether it's in the GCC, Europe, the U.S., Asia, is competing on the same field for that.
Yeah. And look, just to bring that point home, I mean, even France has outlined a plan to become Europe's AI power. So this is the next wave that we're entering, right? Is governments want to empower industry to succeed and to become champions in these emerging frontier technologies.
You and I had the opportunity to chat about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was digging through your website and looking at different documents that are on there, one of the things that there was a brief article that talked about the concept of countries that professed and pushed privately that scientists there, their first calling was actually towards the government, not towards the science, not towards their businesses. It was actually, there was a term that you guys used in the language. I forget what it was called, but it was.
Well, I think the way they say it is that scientists have a motherland.
A motherland. That's right. The motherland of scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And that just, it wasn't mind-blowing, but it really was mind-enhancing and perspective-enhancing, because all of a sudden, think of all the different countries where their citizens have come to the United States, the number one higher education center on the planet.
Yeah.
And if their first calling is back to the motherland, then theoretically, not for sure, but theoretically, everything they worked on is at risk. I mean, is that part of the risk that governments and Fortune 2000 globally are at risk for? Is that right?
Look, I think this is a critical issue. And there's a couple of ways to slice this. So one is, you're right, that the U.S. is still the global leader in attracting top talent. And I think that that's not going to go away. And I think despite the fact that we are in a confrontation with nations like China and Russia, we need to come up with really novel strategies for retaining folks who came from those countries who are being targeted by their governments, and develop plans to keep them here, to support democracy and what we believe in, the individual rights. Obviously, those scientific advances as well have impact not only in economic growth and development, but a lot of dual-use technology that have military applications here as well. So that's on the first piece of it. The second piece is we are in a global talent war. So we're seeing that play out across the globe. And when you think about quantum or AI, for example, these are emerging technology fields that, the amount of people working in them is not infinite. We're talking hundreds, thousands maybe, that are really meaningfully driving forward advances in those technology fields. And so they get targeted quite actively. The other piece of this is, to your point, to showcase the challenge that we're having. Even in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, there was an article that Congress is now looking at the Department of Defense and asking them if they're properly vetting grant applicants so that the U.S. government is not inadvertently funding scientific research that is going back to countries like China and Russia and supporting what I would define as adversary research and military programs.
Which is really interesting, Greg, because on Friday I was up in Ogden, Utah, and I participated in a small gathering of individuals that were serving the defense, the military, the Infosec space. And we were talking about OTA, other technical, I'm not going to get it right.
Other transaction authority?
Yes, other transaction authority. Thank you. Someone who worked in government would actually remember that. I should remember that. I apologize. It was fascinating because literally without going through a traditional RFI, RFP, RFQ process that can take years before a contract is actually awarded.
Right.
And then have to go back to the well whenever there's a modification with an OTA, any federal branch of government, you find a government employee, including members of the military, who has a need for a product or a service, they literally can go from idea to having monies being available within 90 days and go from a prototype to commercial application. Literally, boom, 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 without having to go back to the well, ever.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
It's a fantastic thing, but if you have a bad actor that's involved, then the whole thing is at risk. Right?
Yep.
So you have a couple of nexus points as you guys are working independently in D.C., in New York, in different industries. You're still connected. That's what happens with twins, right? They sense when there's a movement in the force.
We talk a lot.
Something's happened in the force, right? And you say, gee, maybe we should do something together. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, look, when in finance on the investment side, like you use so much data. There's a ton of data that flows into the deal process, whether it's looking at the market, who are the top companies within a segment, to then digging into an individual deal. I started noticing more and more that we just had data gaps, especially when you're dealing with these tech investments where there is a lot of competition at that government level. You're starting to see like different conflicts of interest, different strategic moves being made by the company and then also their respective governments to position that company for success. In the U.S., we do that less. You don't see that a ton here because we do have more of a line between the private sector and the public sector. But in the Middle East and in Asia and in Russia and other countries, you don't have that.
There's a blurring.
There is. And actually, as a Western trained investor operating in those markets, it's uncomfortable to have that information gap. So we tried to fill it as much as we could. I think we did a pretty good job, but recognize, like both Greg and I saw that if that was what was going on in the commercial domain, and we're dealing with that on the front lines as the investment community, companies are dealing with the same thing. And it really covers what we identify as three core areas, which the first one we've talked a bit about, which is talent. Trying to understand talent flows, what talent are really driving forward these emerging technologies. And as Greg mentioned, when you dig into it, there's actually not that many. So companies need to understand, and even investors need to understand where those folks are and what they're working on. Second is the critically emerging technologies. What are those? What are their use cases, and what are the implications for those as they mature? And then the third is supply chains. And we saw that during COVID, just massive disruption in supply chains, but also looking at it from a government angle, that strategic element of control of supply chains. First time we've really seen that at scale globally. And I think that has really propelled Strider over the last couple years as a data business. We're collecting data globally, focused on those three vectors and delivering them to companies and governments. Think of it as like a digital twin, no pun intended here, like a digital version of their ecosystems with those three vectors. So it's been an incredible blitz the last 3 years to get this going. But we're seeing massive interest in the market. We're growing rapidly. And we think that this is providing a unique competitive edge for our clients to solve this massive problem that Greg was talking about earlier.
Okay, so we're talking about people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We're talking about tech.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about logistics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So officially you start in 2019?
Yep.
Okay.
May 6th.
May 6th. Okay.
So 3 years last week.
Day after Cinco de Mayo.
Yes.
So, all right. And memory serves right, you are currently tracking / have access to 20,000 different data sources that you are watching, analyzing, compiling, aggregating, cross-tabbing, all of that. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And what does that mean then? And how in the crap do you even get to 20,000 data sources? Although I can get there actually pretty fast. But for our audience out there.
I think we're up to about 30,000.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Okay, 50% growth
There
in
you
just
go.
a
Yeah.
couple of weeks. No, just
Well,
seriously.
Look, to tackle this problem, it's all about scale. And it's not just about hoovering up data. So we live in a data abundant world. And one could argue there's too much, and it creates a lot of noise. So really what we've come to view is we've now entered a phase from that data perspective where people don't just want data, they want to know what to do with it. So the reason we're collecting all of this data is so that we can effectively process it. And a great way to think about it is like an oil refinery. We've tapped into the crude sources, we're pulling that in, and then we run it through a refinery that allows us to pull out relevant, actionable data along those three pillars that you discussed, and create those digital models for our customers. And we're able to do this totally outside of their own network. So customers do not give us data. They do not give us access to their networks. We are doing this all externally and then giving them a perspective of their corporate ecosystems from that outside in viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, head's not exploding, but it's close,
Mm-hmm.
right? As I think about the data that I try to filter through to get to the information, because that's really what you want, right?
Right.
It's not enough to have the data.
Right.
You could be drowning in data and not be able to make a decision,
Right.
because you haven't been able to connect the dots. More importantly, to see beyond the horizon, let alone the event horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What does this really mean? What are the implications of this data as I start to parse it together?
Well, look, what it means is we live in a world where, because of Internet of Things, most people, most companies, they have what we call digital exhaust. You could even say nation states have this. So government digital exhaust.
Exhaust. Okay.
So if you have digital exhaust, it is in essence collectible data, right? And so that's what that means for us, right? In this day and age. And you can do a lot of different things with it that are both exciting and for some folks maybe a little outside of the norm of what they think is possible. But we're entering a new phase here where, because there is so much data and it's been compounding year over year. I mean, we saw a massive amount of data get pushed online by governments around the world during COVID because it had to be, right? Everybody was working remotely. Yeah. All of that had to get pushed online. We saw our collection capability just go exponential growth. So that is something that has really driven our business. Maybe even 5 years ago, I think we would have a totally different value proposition. and the burden to collect all of that data would have been higher than it is today. But for now, I don't think that's going to be slowing down at all. And we are seeing countries use this same type of data to get a better handle on their economies, on the investment flows that are occurring, and even people as they're coming and going through countries.
So does that mean that you are using off-the-shelf data gathering tools as well as your own proprietary data gathering tool sets? Is that right? Is there a hybrid there?
So we've built that all in-house. So we're a vertically integrated data business, right? So we're doing the collection and delivery, and then everything in between. I think the other element too that Greg mentioned that I've learned over the last couple of years, data businesses are great. There's a lot that you can do, to your point, with the data that actually can become a double-edged sword. We take a very focused approach to what type of data products we want to build and deliver, and really it's about what is the use case that we want to enable and the problem we want to solve. And I think like going back to the overarching problem set, like really what we want to be able to do is get super granular for our clients so that they can start making the best decisions for their businesses to remain competitive over the long term. We're seeing, the data is out there in terms of like how long a company in the S&P 500 can stay in the S&P 500. It goes down every year. There's more and more competition. When you start to look at emerging tech, that's fierce, right? And so we want to enable our clients through this data to be able to better protect their IP, understand. You think about if you're a global organization, you have 60,000 employees globally, you have thousands of vendors, and your security team has like 5 people, and you're supposed to cover that globally and protect all your IP, all the emerging tech, all the R&D programs. It's quite
It is laughable, right?
Yeah, it's almost impossible.
It's not funny, but as you lay it out like that, I'm like, oh my heavens, that's 60,000 endpoints.
That's right.
All at risk, let alone their smartphones, their computers, their tablets, all their social media profiles, everything else. The number gets staggeringly big very, very quickly.
Yeah. So what our products do and the capabilities we enable is to be able to say, all right, instead of being a mile wide and an inch deep globally, let's hone it in and let's actually start to focus on what are the core critical technologies that will be the future of the business, who's working on them and developing them, where does that line up with risks to the business, and then be able to view that through one pane of glass holistically makes it very actionable and very consumable for our clients.
It was about 6 months ago where I had an epiphany. Okay, fine. So you have Moore's Law.
Yep.
Moore's Law says that because of advancements in manufacturing, you're going to see the doubling of the amount of transistors, the halving of the price, and the halving of the size of the semiconductors, microprocessors, every 18 to 24 months, right? Mm-hmm. And we've seen this incredible growth as a result of that. And then you have Metcalfe's Law, which fewer people know about, which talks about the value of to a network when you add an additional node, right? And this was Bob Metcalfe who invented Ethernet. Mm-hmm. And then you have Andreessen. Andreessen in 2011 writes, software is going to eat the world. Mm-hmm. Wall Street Journal, it's amazing. If you've not read this, go find Mark Andreessen's Software is going to Eat the World. It's available publicly anywhere, right? It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And now I think we're at this new point, which I say is a takeoff on what James Carville told then candidate Bill Clinton. He told Clinton, he said, you're losing. You focus on one thing. It's the economy, stupid. And to me, I think it's the data, stupid.
Absolutely.
If you are not a data company, you are destined to lose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because without understanding the data to transform it into actionable information, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Am I on point there?
So I'll actually say data is becoming, and it already really is, but it's not yet in the psyche of everybody or every corporation. But data is becoming a means of production. So when you think about capital, labor, and land, that historically, those are the 3 means of production. There actually is one country that has officially made it one of the means of production, and that is China.
China, the PRC.
So they are actually building policy around that through that economic lens. And if companies and governments around the world aren't waking up to that and understanding it, they're going to be left behind.
Yep.
Very interesting. So you form this company, you start gathering data. You're now up to 30,000 sources of data. You've built your own internally, vertically integrated process for, I'm assuming, AI, machine learning, predictive analytics. How do you then deliver that information to your clients? Is it, super encrypted dashboard? Do you go have clandestine meetings in alleyways?
No.
I mean, what do you do? I mean,
Just put a chalk mark on the wall.
exactly.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, first I want to give just make note. So Eric and I are two of the co-founders. There's a third, Mike Brown. Mike Brown is our third co-founder.
The CTO.
CTO.
Yeah.
He
Data
is
expert genius really on that.
Yeah. So he definitely is the X factor here. When you think about the founding story of Strider, Eric brought that finance and go-to-market and operational expertise to the table. I brought more of that intelligence and research, source identification, how to methodology development piece. Mike brought how to automate and scale. Those three things, I mean, that is the core of Strider today. And if it was just us two, or even just me and Mike, this would not have been the same story or outcome. And so he is the one who built all of that and came from, he likes to call himself a refugee from the ad tech world, but was one of the founding members of a company called ComScore, which was a trailblazer in ad tech.
Yeah.
And was their CTO. So, when I talk about, hey, we're doing 30,000 sources, we've got about 2.5 to 3 billion unique data objects in our system. Mike calls that a decent amount of data.
Yeah, we're on our way, so to speak.
A decent amount
A decent
of data.
amount. I think he was managing a system that was processing 1 trillion rows a month.
Yeah.
So we got a long ways to go, is all I'm saying here. But look, the way that we deliver this to our customers is we process that and refine it to data that is only relevant to them. So back to this notion of
A customer set of one.
correct. So back to that point of we want to deliver high value actionable data. What that means is you can't just open up a data lake and say, here's the search function. Now I put the burden back onto you to do all the discovery and to go find what matters. We refine that down to the specific organization, and then we create a dashboard for them. It is, there are some security steps you have to take to get access to it. But what that also does is it makes it really refined and actionable for those folks. So it's relevant to them, it's timely, and it drives mission objectives that they have. One of the mantras we have driven at Strider is, if it's interesting, take it out. It needs to be actionable. It has to drive an outcome. It can't just be something that looks good and feels good.
Very interesting. Okay. So we're here today in part because I stumbled across an announcement from your firm a couple weeks back announcing that you had closed on a $45 million round Series B funding. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you do with that money? It obviously doesn't go into your pockets. So how do you drive the company forward to help more and more organizations, whatever those organizations may be, to have actionable information to help them be successful and to prevent attacks from outside? What do you do? How do you use that money?
So right now for us, it's focused on continuing to invest in our R&D. So the tech infrastructure that we've been building, we're going to continue to double down on that. Automation is a key point. Earlier you brought up a bit about ML. So that's something that you have to have really strong underlying data to really enrich and develop those types of capabilities. So we're going to continue to invest in that as well. On the go-to-market side, what's been interesting is we started the company again with that focus on industry, that they were the ones dealing with this day-to-day and needed better tools. As a result of that, you start to get inbound from governments who are interested in learning more about what's happening in industry and the role that they can play, whether it's through policy making or through grant reform to deal with this problem set. So, and those are not, generally speaking, scalable products, to sell into government. So we're working on that go-to-market and that product scalability for servicing governments, both in North America and in Europe and other parts of the world. So I think, with our Series B, it's about enriching that data set through R&D investment and then really scaling globally. Just for, I'll say over the last 3 months, as things in Europe ramped up with the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the war there, we have a really small operation in Europe, but our pipeline has grown 4x in the last 3 months. I mean, the amount of demand as a result of these geopolitical shifts for what Strider is doing, the data and the capabilities we're delivering is growing as some of these geopolitical events turn into what we're now seeing as economic wars.
One other thing I'll add to that is, we are a company on a mission, and the focus we have is on enabling the Western world, or the free world, as we sometimes call it, to identify and mitigate these types of risks. What Eric hit on is, in terms of Russia, Ukraine, is the most recent in-our-face example of what has been actually going on for quite some time.
Yeah.
Is that great power competition is back. Economic statecraft is back. These are things that used to be a normal course of geopolitical rivalry and conflict. And post-Cold War, that slowed down and lagged, right? But we're seeing that ramp up aggressively. And so that is where we also look at this from a fundraising perspective and as a business perspective, as how can we create a very strong foundation and make sure that the investors that we bring on have a long-term view, so that this is not a flash in the pan. That is not the goal we have here, and is aligned with us on building out the capabilities to tackle this problem over the long run, so that ultimately we put ourselves, our country, and our allies in a better position to win.
So I won't ask, quote unquote, specific client names. Not appropriate because of the business you're in.
Right.
Okay. So, but I would assume manufacturing. I would assume import-export. I would assume finance, Wall Street, right? You've mentioned already government, right?
Yeah. So think industries with heavy R&D spend that are strategic, and so semiconductors, oil and gas, biotech and pharma, aerospace and defense,
Big tech,
government. So that's where we're seeing a lot of adoption for Strider and what we're delivering to our customers. They've been dealing with these problems for a decade plus. So that's the other thing, is we're not coming in and educating anybody. They know the problem well. I call it sometimes the 2 A's, right? They have high awareness and they have high anxiety, because it's kind of like knowing that there's an adversary out there targeting you, but you can't quite place it. So we can help them better understand that risk landscape and develop those plans to actually proactively protect themselves, rather than just reacting to events as they get alerts.
Yeah. Here's another interesting thing that I've learned too is industry gets frustrated because they think that some of these national security related issues, whether it's their IP being stolen or countries not complying with WTO, should be dealt with by their home government, right? And then it's not really getting dealt with. And then government gets mad because they say industry doesn't care about the competition or national security. But I actually think that it's the opposite. Our system, number one, isn't designed for government to actively support companies. That's just not how we're designed. But on the flip side, I will say, we have not had to convince anybody in industry that this is a problem or that there's something they can do about it. It's that they didn't know that there was any solution for them to start using to take action. So once you present them a solution to a problem, I mean, they're all aligned. This isn't. I think that's something that government needs to start understanding a little bit more. That the historical cost-benefit analysis has absolutely changed, and companies do want to compete and they want to win. Obviously, that's what they're designed to do. And if you can give them the right data and the right tools, they're going to go do it. It's great.
That battleship moves pretty slowly and takes a while, though, to change direction.
It does.
So it's one of the
absolutely
challenges
does.
that we're faced with. So last thing before we wrap up, and this has been great visiting with both of you. Thank you. Is there anything that you would share with the Silicon Slopes audience based upon the data that you're seeing? Be aware of this over the next 6 to 12 months. Watch for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that this is borderline free advice, but what would you tell the audience in Silicon Slopes ecosystem? What would you say?
Well, I'd say, look, the same reason we moved here and are building a business here is Silicon Slopes is on the map. So that's a good thing, and it could become a bad thing because as it becomes more well-known, the tech companies here become larger and have more of a role, not only in building out technology that drives U.S. competitiveness, but we're also seeing an increasing number of Utah-based companies working with the U.S. government and other government agencies. It creates attention from foreign actors. So look, Utah is not alone in that there is active operations here targeting technology and the talent that exists. That includes obviously government facilities that are located in the state, but increasingly tech companies as well. So not getting into any specific details, but those are just facts of the matter. And I think it's important for people just to have a clear-eyed take on it. It doesn't need to drive paranoia or concern. I think just having a healthy awareness that this is going on is an important part of doing business.
Awareness, not anxiety.
Correct.
Yeah.
But be smart.
Yeah. You know, one other thing I'd add is that if you look at culturally what's been happening in our country, there aren't a lot of places in the U.S. anymore that are great to build national security related tech companies. Utah is one of them. This is a great place to build a company that has that sort of focus and angle to it. That's why we're here doing it, and I think that's something that we want to help build out, help maintain, and all the resources are here to put Utah on the map for that as well.
Wonderful. Eric, Greg, thank you so much for coming in today. Two of the three co-founders of Strider. Congratulations again on your funding, and very interested to see where you go over the coming months and years ahead. I'm very excited for you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thanks,
Great to be here with you.
David Politis here with Silicon Slopes, and thank you for taking time with us today on Silicon Slopes Conversations. We'll see you next time.